Good afternoon. Special, warm welcome to Walter Block, who's flown across the Atlantic to be here and to talk about the moral case of free markets. Walter Block is professor of economics at Loyola University. He's also senior fellow at the Ludwig von Mises Institute. And he's published, I believe, more than 500 peer-reviewed articles, 24 books, and also writes op-eds, thousands of op-eds in his life in newspapers, etc., and has traveled around the world speaking about free market ideas, libertarian ideas. And it's a great pleasure to have you here, Walter. Walter will be talking for about 45 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for discussion, and we'll finish the session in 1.5 hours. It's going to be great. Walter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Wow, with an introduction like that, I'd better be great. My most famous accomplishment is that I shook the hand of Ludwig von Mises, and I never washed my hands since. So if you shake my hand, you get a little dirty, but you'll channel Ludwig von Mises, so that's pretty good. My title is The Moral Case for Free Markets, Free Enterprise. And I guess the most salient, the most important reason why free enterprise is good and government is bad is because the marketplace is voluntary. And surely a moral ideal would be that all interaction should be voluntary. And the government is coercive. Taxes, the way the government is financed is through taxes. And if you don't pay your taxes, they put you in jail. And if we dealt with each other in that way, namely if I came up with a gun and I pointed it at you and I said, give me money, and you said, well, what for? And I said, well, I have good purposes. I'll give it to the poor, education, whatever. You would rightly label me as a thief because I compelled you to pay. And compulsion is the opposite of morality. I mean, morality seems to me that all interaction should be voluntary. As Robert Nozick once said, we should have capitalist acts between consenting adults, not just ordinary acts between consenting adults. The left is always saying we should have anything between consenting adults, but not free trade, not markets. So that is one element of why the market is good, the market is ethical, and the opposite of the market would be government, and government is bad. Some people say that that government is best which governs least. The anarchist libertarian would say that that government is best which governs not at all, because governing is compelling people, and you're not supposed to compel people. Okay, we make an exception for children. Children are different in all philosophies. And I once was in a debate with somebody over whether you could use assault and battery, in effect, to make sure that your year-old baby gets his diaper changed when he doesn't want to have it changed. And there was an exception. It's okay to be paternalist for children, but not to treat adults like one-year-old babies who sometimes, have to be held down so that they get their diaper changed when they're too busy to do that. They've got more important things to do. But that just sort of is the tip of the iceberg. There's much more to be said, both on an ethical and an economic point of view. And I think economics partakes of ethics in the sense that it's ethical to have a more prosperous society than a less prosperous society. I don't think it's ethical to be poorer than we need be. So the market also helps us become richer or to cure poverty, which I think also is an ethical sort of a thing. Okay, now I have a long list of reasons why, in addition to the voluntary business, and then I'll consider some objections, and then the most fun for me, and perhaps for you, will be to have discussion, dialogue, questions, disagreements, what have you. Okay, so one of the reasons is the time dimension. And I say that we have much more control as consumers over producers than we as voters have over politicians. And the reason is just in terms of time. I don't know how often the vote occurs here. I think it's maybe the parliamentary system in the US, with which I'm most familiar. It's every 4 years. So if we don't like Donald Trump, and a lot of us don't, but I didn't like Hillary either, we have to wait 4 years. And to impeach is very rare in the US and I think in most places. So it's a 4-year stint that we're stuck with whoever we've got. Whereas in the market, activity occurs every day. Maybe not every minute, but maybe every hour, or certainly every day we can buy or sell something. So we as consumers have a lot of control over producers. If we don't like what they're doing, we give them a thumbs down and they make less profits. And if they keep doing things we don't like, they lose money more and more, and eventually they have to go bankrupt, and then they start producing something else or become workers. But the point is that we have a lot of control over them, whereas we don't have control over politicians. Suppose we decide we're too fat. We want to go on a diet. And that means we have to have more rabbit food and celery and carrots and things like that, and less food that makes life worthwhile. There are two ways to accomplish this task. One is we write to the Prime Minister or to Donald Trump and say, please, Mr. Trump, or please, Mr. Prime Minister, tell the farmers to stop producing this stuff and start producing that stuff. That's one way to go. Another way to go through the market is we just start buying more celery and carrots and less chocolate and cake. And the prices in celery and rabbit food go up, and the profits go up there, and the profits and prices of chocolate go down, and ice cream. And then farmers are led by Adam Smith's invisible hand to start producing what we want. And it occurs automatically without any fanfare, and we don't appreciate that. Somehow we think that if it's going to be done, it's got to be done through the political system, and the political system is not as spontaneous and not as effective. Okay, the second one is a thing called rational ignorance. You're thinking of going and buying a motorcycle or an air conditioner or whatever it is you're thinking of buying. You'll ask your friends about it. You'll consult with Consumer Reports or Good Housekeeping seal of approval. I hope I'm not insulting anyone. All my examples will come from the US. Probably there are the equivalents of that in Denmark. Namely, we'll become knowledgeable about it, and we will then make as good a choice as we can. In the political sphere, a guy with a PhD in economics or political science gets one vote, and a low information voter gets one vote. And the low information voter has no incentive to become knowledgeable about what's going on because he or she only has one vote. Whereas in the market, your one vote is definitive. Whereas in the political scheme, you have one out of many, many millions of votes. So that would be another advantage of the market vis-a-vis the political system. I was talking to some friends of mine before, and they said it was very windy outside. And I said, that's the government's fault. In my view, everything is the government's fault. Why? Because they take half the GDP away, well, in this country, more than half the GDP away. And with their half of the GDP or more of it, they engage in all sorts of regulations which make us even less productive than otherwise. So my claim is that if you want to have a cure for cancer, I'm serious about this. If you want to have a cure for the wind or cancer or underarm odor or whatever it is, it's the government's fault because they're taking so much of the GDP away, and if they weren't, we would be much richer and much more able to cure cancer or do these other great things. Okay, another one is unanimity. In the market, there's unanimity. I bought this tie for $20, let's say, and there was unanimity between me and the guy who sold me the tie. He agreed to sell it to me for $20, and I agreed to pay him $20 for it. We had unanimity. And every last example in the market is one of unanimous agreement. In government, there's no such thing as unanimity. There's the majority, and then there's the minority, and the majority gets its way. Well, imagine if we had to have a vote as to whether I could buy this tie or you could buy the bicycle that you ride around in. That would be very different. So surely unanimous agreement is preferable to voting and some people win and some people lose. It's okay to win and lose in poker or in basketball or something, but in something other than that, we want unanimity. Unanimity is the ideal, whereas being voted down or even on the winning side is not good. I mean, suppose we all had a vote as to whether I could buy this tie. It would be a pain in the neck, and it would be a sort of a violation of my rights because I want to buy this tie, and you vote against the red tie or something like that. That would be highly problematic. Another one is conflict reduction. In the marketplace, it's peaceful. We don't have to fight with each other. And in the public sector, there are all sorts of tuggings and pullings and pushings, and my side's going to beat your side, ha, 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 and there's conflict. For example, should students be allowed to pray in school, forced to pray in school, or not? Well, if it's a government school, we have to decide that, and everybody has to be either forced to or allowed to or not allowed to, and it's sort of a one-size-fits-all. I mean, if you're in a public school, you have to do it this way or that way, and that's it, and somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. On the other hand, if we have private schools, your private school does this, your private school does that, everybody wins. So there's much less conflict. And it's not just public schools, it's, streets. One of my books is We Should Privatize the Streets. I won't go into that in great depth, although later, maybe during the question period, I could. But there was this case, should the Nazis be allowed to march in Skokie, Illinois? It was a Supreme Court case. And there were a lot of Jews there, and they didn't like it. And on the other hand, the Nazis wanted free speech, and liberals want to support them. But the point is that if you have public streets, you have to decide one way or another. Whereas if you had private streets, well, the Nazis can march here but not there, kind of a thing. Or bicycle paths. Everyone's riding a bicycle here. I'm amazed at how many bicycles there are and all the paths. Well, should the paths be this wide or that wide or this wide or narrower? By the way, bicycle is what's the word? Anti-ageist. It's ageist. People my age have a lot of trouble riding a bicycle, and I'm kidding here. I'm not fully serious here. I have to accuse somebody of ageism or something, otherwise I don't have a good day. Museums. Right now, I live in New Orleans, and they just knocked down the statue of Robert E. Lee and a few other things, other statues, Beauregard and other Confederate-type people. Well, should the museums have Confederate flags in them or not? It's got to be one way or the other, and if it's a public museum, we're going to have a vote, or maybe the mayor will decide, and then we can get rid of him in 4 years or not. But the point is, if we had private museums, this museum would have this, and that museum would have that, and the third museum would have something else, and there would be much less conflict. And needless fomenting of conflict, I think is problematic from an ethical point of view. We'd live a much more ethical life if we didn't have to compel each other to either have the Confederate flag or not have it or what have you. Okay, another one is, if we have free enterprise, we will enable you socialists to do your thing. You can have your commune, your kibbutz, whatever it is, on a voluntary basis. So we free enterprises will allow all sorts, as Uncle Mao said, let 1,000 flowers bloom. We can have many, many different kinds of organizations, including socialist ones, voluntary socialist ones, not compulsory socialist ones, but at least voluntary. Whereas under the government's scheme, do you think we free enterprises are going to get ink or paper or anything like that? Of course not. Namely, we can accommodate other people in a way that they can't accommodate us. So surely that's another ethical reason for supporting free enterprise rather than governmentalism. And another one is paternalism. Again, as I said, it's okay to be paternalistic toward babies or children, but not for adults. Take Social Security. You're too stupid to save for your old age, so we're going to compel you to save for your old age. On the other hand, if you're so stupid that you can't save for your old age, why are we letting you vote in the first place? Or if we're letting you vote, which means we trust that you're a sensible person, why are we compelling you with all these paternalistic sort of things? I spent half my year in Canada, and there they have compulsory bicycle helmets. You have to wear a bicycle helmet. Here, happily, I see people, some with helmets, some without. But that's just another aspect of paternalism. I think people should be free. I mean, I think it's more safe to have a helmet, but it should be up to you. And the same with seat belts and all these other nanny state kind of regulations, which would not occur in the free enterprise system. Look, suppose I open up a restaurant and I said, to come to my restaurant, you have to wear a helmet. Who knows why? The waitress could spill something on you. Who knows? Well, we know what would happen to me. My restaurant wouldn't do too well, which is all well and good. Although it might do well for some weirdo people that like helmets, you know, the helmetists, or if there are such people, I just invented them. But maybe I'll do well for a small sliver of the community, and that would be an aspect of freedom. Whereas if the government decides, they decide one size fits all, everybody either has to or can't or must or whatever. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why free enterprise is good and government is bad. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider a few objections. What are the objections to my thesis? And there are several. The first one is capitalism is unfair to women. It's sexist somehow. Deep within the bowels of free enterprise is a diminution of women. It's unfair to women. And the evidence for this is the pay gap. And the pay gap keeps moving around. Sometimes it's 20%, sometimes 30%, 25%. It moves around over the years. If you look at the statistics, I'll assume the pay gap is 30%. So for every $10 that a man earns, a woman earns $7. And this is seen as unfair. Okay, so here we have male, and here we have female, and here we have the wage. And the male gets, say, $10, and the female gets $7. What determines productivity? What determines wages in the first place? What determines wages in the first place is productivity. Because if my productivity is $20 an hour, and you, my employer, pay me $25 an hour, what's going to happen to you? You're going to go broke if you do that once too often. On the other hand, if you only pay me $15 an hour, you'll be making a pure profit off of me of $5 an hour, and someone else will offer $15.01 or $15.02 or 16. You can see where it's creeping up toward 20. Now, it never reaches 20. It only reaches 20 in equilibrium, and we're never in equilibrium, but we're always tending toward equilibrium. So wages tend to equal productivity. Okay, so I'm going to assume that the productivity of the male is 10 and the productivity of the female is 10, because if the productivity were different, well, that would be a good reason, a good explanation, a good excuse for why women are making less, right? Okay, so how much profit, we usually indicate profit with pi, how much profit are you making if you hire a man? 0, which is okay. In equilibrium, profits are 0. Profits are never 0 in the real world. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative, but they're always tending towards 0. How much profit do you make if you hire a woman? $3 an hour. It's as if a woman has a little thing on her lapel saying, hire me and you make an extra $3 an hour. Is this sustainable? No, this is ridiculous. This can't last. There's something wrong with this. I mean, this would mean that in industries that hire a disproportionate number of women, they'd be very, very profitable. And industries that hired a disproportionate number of men, they'd be making no profit. And we know that profits have to be equal in all industries also, because if profits are very different in one industry than in another, capital will flow out of the industry with low profit and into the industry with high profit, pushing down the profit here and up there until there's some sort of equilibration. Now, we never reach it again, but we're always tending in that direction. So this is nonsense. Nonsense on stilts, whatever you want to say, but it's very highly problematic. Okay, let me see how I do this. Here we go. Thank you. Now, suppose that we have, again, male and female, and now we say that, what is it, the productivity of males is 10, and the productivity of women is 7, and I'll try to explain why that would be. And we have equal pay laws, namely the pay or the wage is 10 and 10. Again, the profit in hiring a male is 0. What's the profit in hiring a woman? -3. Namely, you're going to have vast unemployment of women if you have equal pay. This is similar to the minimum wage law. In the US, they're trying to raise the minimum wage law to $15 an hour. And a lot of young black males just don't, for historical or other reasons, I don't want to get into the reason, don't have that productivity. And hence their unemployment rate is over 40%. Now, 40% was something that never really even existed for the overall population during the Depression. But it's 40%. That's horrible. And these kids are bored stiff. They can't get a job. They get into crime. They go to jail. This is a horrible thing. So equal pay laws are a horrible thing. Happily, we don't really have them, because if we did, the unemployment rate of women would be much higher than it is. Right now, the unemployment rate of men and women is roughly the same. Again, I'm resorting to US statistics. I don't know the data here. But I assume that if you don't have a hard-nosed equal pay law, you wouldn't have a disparate amount of unemployment for one or the other gender. Okay, so why is it that women have a lower productivity? Now, you might say a century ago, or 2 centuries ago, the reason women had lower productivity... Is it warm in here? No, it's sort of the hot air is coming from the front, and so you people have to watch out. Economics is fun, but it's hot work. So if you could cool us down, that would be good, I guess. Thank you. What do I know? 2 centuries ago, women had lower productivity than men because most jobs took upper body strength. The way we knock down a tree is by sawing it. The way we dug a hole to put in a foundation for a building is with a pick and shovel. And on average, men are stronger than women. Now, on average. Some women, the women shot putters in the Olympics are probably stronger than most men here, but on average, men are stronger than women, so it would be no accident to find out why men were more productive than women a century or 2 ago, because most jobs, took a lot of upper body strength. But nowadays, the way we knock down a tree is you press a button or you pull a lever. The way we dig a hole is with a steam shovel. And women can do it roughly as well as men, although I don't know what it is like here, but in the US, many more men die of accidents on the job than women. So men are taking more dangerous jobs, which, other things equal, ceteris paribus, would call forth a higher wage because of the danger. So why is it nowadays that we have a 30% gap, whereas so few jobs require physical strength? Maybe it would justify a 1% gap or something like that. Why is it? The reason is it's because of an economic doctrine called opportunity costs or alternative costs. What is this doctrine? This doctrine is that whenever you do anything, you do it at the cost of not being able to do something else as well or at all. Usain Bolt is the fastest man on the planet in the 100 and the 200 in the Olympics. How good is he at playing the cello? I don't know. I assume he's not very good. Because the way to play the cello well is to play the cello all day, and he's instead doing weightlifting or other things that sprinters do. Yo-Yo Ma is the best cellist on the planet. What's his time in the 200? I don't think it's very good. It would be a lot better if he'd gotten to the gym a little instead of playing the cello. The point is, whenever you do anything, you do it at the cost of not being able to do something else at all or as well. Now I want to take a little survey. And the survey is, if you're married, answer in terms of your marriage. If you're not married, answer in terms of a marriage with which you're most familiar, your parents, your ex-marriage, or whatever it is. And I'm going to give you three choices. One, the husband and the wife do roughly equal housework. Housework is cooking, cleaning, taking care of the baby, stuff like that. It doesn't have to be exactly equal. It could be 55-45, but roughly equal. That's one possibility, is one is equal. The second one is that the husband does more housework than the wife, and the third one is that the husband does significantly less housework than the wife. Okay, ready, set, we're going to take a survey. In whatever marriage you're now thinking of, is it roughly equal, that the husband and the wife are roughly equal in terms of housework, cooking, cleaning, shopping, things like that? Raise your hand if your marriage or the marriage you're thinking of is roughly equal. Oh, wow. That's amazing. You people are all liars. No, I'm kidding. I would say maybe a third of the people raise their hands. This is very statistically different than what goes on in Canada and the US, with which I'm most familiar, and sociologists have done studies, and the percentages are not anything like a third. It's much like, 5-10%. Okay, so we have, say, 30% here. I didn't count hands, but roughly something like that. How many say that the husband does more than the wife? Two liars. Okay, so call it 1%. And how many say that the wife does more than the husband? Oh, wow. Well, then we got 70% or 69% if I'm counting correctly. Namely, many more people support this. Well, that's one reason why women earn less than men in the market, because they're too busy specializing in the household, cooking, cleaning, shopping, childcare, whatever. And it's not just that. It's also, if a husband and a wife are both PhD chemists and they both come from a hard day work at the lab, what does the husband say to the wife? What's for dinner, dear? The point is, even when they're doing exactly the same, the wife is doing more. And if you have 3 kids spaced 3 years apart from the first to the last one, and from the time the first one is born until the last one is, the third kid is viable on his own, say in high school or grade 10 or something like that, you're talking 15 years. And if you're both PhD chemists or lawyers or doctors or something where you have atrophy of physical human capital, well, obviously, assuming equal ability as a physicist or as a mathematician or as a computer nerd, the husband is working full-time for 15 years. The wife is either working not at all or very little. And now in the 15th year, it's amazing that the husband is more productive than the wife? No, it's perfectly understandable. And then there's the question of, suppose they're both living here in Copenhagen and they get one of them gets a great job offer in London. Where are they more likely to go? If the husband got the offer or if the wife got the offer? Namely, the issue of the trailing spouse. They're more likely to act as if they're a firm trying to maximize the family income. And the way you maximize the family income is by going where the husband is going, because he's going to be in the market all throughout, and the woman is less likely to do that. So I reject this objection. To reiterate, I'm saying the free enterprise system is great. And some people say, no, it's unfair. Women make less than men. And I'm saying, well, yeah, they make less than men because they're less productive. Not because they're stupid or anything, and not because they're weaker physically, because that doesn't really mean too much nowadays, but because they're doing other things. And the doctrine of opportunity costs or alternative costs indicates that whenever you do anything, you do it at the cost of doing something else less well or not at all. So this is hardly immoral or unvirtuous or problematic from any fair-minded perspective. It's not as if there's something deeply embedded in the bowels of the free enterprise system that's against women or against blacks or against anyone, gays, what have you. Okay, the next objection is, what do we have here? What I wanted to do is, what I gave you here on the previous thing was a logical point. I was making a point in logic. Now what I'm going to do is just give you some empirical evidence. And the empirical evidence is that if you take all females compared to all males, the wage ratio is 0.7, roughly. It varies. But if you take ever married people means married, widowed, divorced, separated, anything touched with marriage, the ratio is about 0.5 or 0.45. Way lower. It's a gigantic wage gap. And if you take never married females to never married males, there's no wage gap. When I say no wage gap, that would mean exactly, you never get clean statistics of 100%. Or zero wage gap. But my research shows anywhere from 0.95 to 1.05. Namely, sometimes the males are a little higher, sometimes the females are a little higher. On average, there's no gap. And also, if you take the age cohort 16 to 20 or 16 to 24, I forget which it is, again, there's no gap, because age is a proxy for non-married. Namely, very few people are married from 16 to 20. So if there was some reason why there would be this, I'm falling apart here. I'm recovering. Thanks for offering. My collar got in the way of the strap. I'm not used to this sort of thing, but I'm very grateful to it. It allows me to wave my hands around. So you don't get exact figures, but on average, there's no wage gap for the never marrieds, because marriage is an asymmetrical effect. It enhances male income and reduces female income for the reasons I've gone into. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to try to illustrate to you good people is the glass ceiling. What's the glass ceiling? The glass ceiling is that women can go this high, but they can't get higher because, there are problems. For example, there are, I think, 500 grandmasters in chess. Is that right? You're a chess player, Igor? More than 500?
Well, there are thousands.
Thousands of them. How many females are grandmasters? 3. The Polgar sisters. Before them, there was only 1. The worst sister was ranked 400th, the middle sister around 200th, and Judith Polgar is ranked 30th or 40th or something like that. That's a glass ceiling. Very, very few, and chess doesn't take any upper body strength or, any sort of anything, but that's an illustration of the glass ceiling. Another one is prime ministers and presidents. In all of history, there are about 40 prime ministers: Margaret Thatcher and Elizabeth May and Indira Gandhi and Golda Meir. it's not on the fingers of two hands, but it's only about 30 or 40. Whereas every other prime minister or president was a male. So that's another illustration of the glass ceiling. Another one is CEOs, chief executive officers of a company. Very, very few. Another example is not grandmasters, but Nobel Prize winners. And not Nobel Prize winners in those sissy areas like poetry or God knows how they're picking. I'm talking about macho Nobel Prizes in medicine and not in math. You have the Fields Medal, but it's the same thing there. In physics and economics. In economics, Elinor Ostrom just won the Nobel Prize in economics, I think a year or two ago. The only woman ever, and there are about 100 Nobel Prize winners in economics. So this is another example of the glass ceiling. So why is it that we have a glass ceiling? And it's not just under capitalism, under socialism. The prime minister of Russia or North Korea or Cuba, never a woman. So you have that problem there too. I'm now going to try to explain why it is. And thanks, I need all the help I can get here. Why is it? The reason it is because we have this is frequency, numbers of people, and this is, I'll call it good, and I'll call this bad. And under good, I've got things like Nobel Prize winners and chess grandmasters and CEOs and all that good stuff. And the distribution of males and females, I'm going to exaggerate it. It's not like this, but I'll draw it freehand. Males, it's something like this. That's male. Female, it's something like this. Namely, the male and female ability is roughly the same. On average, it might differ a point or two, and there are various studies about IQ and stuff like that. Roughly the same, men and women on average are the same. The difference, can you guys see this? Okay. Wow, you got good eyes. Move over if you can't see it. I don't know. Here it is. Isn't that pretty? The reason is that males are God or nature's crapshoot. There are certain men that are very, very good. Other men are very, very bad. Women are God's or nature's insurance policy. They're clustered in the middle. The standard deviation or the variance of women's abilities is very low. Men are all over the lot. Now, I've given you examples of over here. This is the Grand Master area. This is 3 or 4 standard deviations above the mean. That's where the leaders are. What's going on over here? Well, if you go to prisons, and I assume it's the same everywhere because this is biology and it's got nothing to do with nationality. If you go to a Danish prison or an American prison, who are you going to find there? Men or women? Men. No women. Well, a few. These are the number of women that are in prison. If you go to a mental institution, what do you find? Men or women? Men in the mental institution. If you go look at homeless people who are begging on the street or living, very few women. Every once in a while you see a woman begging, and it's amazing because there are so few. If you go to a cemetery, obviously you'll find equal number of people. But a modern cemetery, see, an early cemetery, you'd have a lot of women dying in childbirth when they were 20 or something like that, or 22. Forget about that. In the modern era, where very, very few women die in childbirth, look at who's dying before their time is up. Time up being 70 or 75 or 80 or something like that. It's all men that are dying in their 20s and their 30s, whether it's in war or even forgetting about war, just shooting each other. I live in New Orleans, and every weekend there are 10 people shot over drugs or this or that. Virtually all men. Every once in a while a woman is shot, but she's a bystander. They're not shooting at the woman usually. Men are shooting each other. So this is why we have a glass ceiling. We have a glass ceiling because men have a very short or small, women have a small standard deviation. They're clustered toward the middle. Men are all over the lot. So, of course, if you're talking over here where you have the leaders, you're not going to find too many women. My daughter, a genius girl, here's a proud father talking about his daughter. She was the valedictorian in high school. She got all A's in college. She now has a PhD in neuroscience, and she's a professor. And she shows me her research. I don't understand I understand the first sentence, and that's about it. Very smart girl. But will she get a Nobel Prize in neuroscience? Well, the odds are against her. But that doesn't mean that she shouldn't try. So don't interpret what I'm saying here as women shouldn't try. No, everyone should try to do their best. I'm just saying that the reality is that as you get up that pyramid of intellectual accomplishment in chemistry or physics or whatever, there are going to be fewer women. So don't misinterpret me as saying, well, Bloch thinks women shouldn't try, they should be barefoot, pregnant in the kitchen or anything like that. No, women should do whatever they want, and God bless them, and that they should do the best they can. It's just that we have this problem. Or I shouldn't say problem, we have this phenomenon. Why do we have this phenomenon? Well, maybe I can, I'll just erase men and I'll put women. I'm going to reverse this. This is now females and this is males. Let's go back in the history. I'm now going to talk a little bit about sociobiology. Sociobiology is the theory that says that we are the way we are because of what it took to live 30,000 or 50,000 years ago and leave children. For example, most people are afraid of snakes. We see a big snake and, we'll be agitated. How many people are afraid of bathtubs? Nobody's afraid of a bathtub. The whole thing is silly. We're hardwired to be afraid of snakes, even though nowadays bathtubs kill more people than snakes do. Milton Friedman was killed by a bathtub. Seriously. He was like 92. He was taking a bath. He slipped. He hit his head on the side, and on the way to the hospital, he died. Bathtubs are very dangerous, but we're not hardwired to be afraid of bathtubs, because what benefit did you have 40,000 years ago, your grandfather, if he was afraid of a bathtub? None. But if he was afraid of a snake, you had an advantage. He left more children than a guy who went up to the snake and patted it and said, "Oh, nice snakey," he's not going to leave too many children. Similarly, another one is, why do beautiful movie actresses of 50 or 60 years old have a hard time getting the sex roles anymore? I'm 75. A lot of these 50-year-old women, they look pretty good to me, but they're not getting these sex roles. Why? Well, our tribe, see, again, there were two tribes. Our tribe and this other tribe both had the same brain power, the same strength, the same opposable thumbs, the same everything. But in their tribe, they saw a 22-year-old girl and said, not ripe, They saw a 50-year-old woman and said, whoop-de-doo, let's get her. They didn't leave too many children. Our tribe, we see a 23-year-old girl and we say, oh boy, that's good stuff. And we see a 50-year-old woman, not as good. So this is a sociobiological explanation of why women of 50 have a hard time getting those roles, whereas a woman of 22 has an easier time, because we are biologically hardwired in a certain direction. Okay, so now we have two tribes, and this is the other tribe. Our tribe was in blue. This is the green tribe, because of the green pen. And in the green tribe, it's the females that were God or nature's crapshoot, and the males, were God or nature's insurance policy. Why did we outbreed them? We outbred them for two reasons. First of all, these women over here, right there, they could get pregnant, but they couldn't raise children. They were too busy being in the cemetery or being in the mental institution or being in prison or being shopping bag ladies or something like that. You get the point? Whereas our women, The blue women were perfectly capable of bringing up children, so we had an advantage over them. Secondly, how many children can a woman have? Tops, 20? That's pretty high, very rare. 10 would be a lot. You have to be Hasidic to have 10 children. I'm kidding here. How many children can a man have? Well, if he's a busy boy, pretty much 1 or 2 a day. If he's really busy, 3 a day. Namely, the point is that here, the geniuses were women, and they could only have 10 children, or 5 or 8 or something like that. So we outbred them at the good end, and we outbred them at the bad end. That's why we have the glass ceiling. Hillary Clinton, bless her heart, was very unhappy. She didn't win. She was going to break the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is not a part of capitalism. It's a part of biology. I'm giving a biological explanation. And again, the socialist countries don't have women leaders either. So that would be my explanation. Namely, the glass ceiling is not a violation of rights on the part of capitalism. Okay, let me give another explanation, another objection. We have. Oh wow, boy, time goes by so fast. Let me just do one more, and this is egalitarianism. We don't have egalitarianism. That's another objection to the free enterprise system. We have rich people. Bill Gates is very rich. There are middle-class people like you and I, and then there are poor people who ask if you want fries with that or whatever. What is the mainstream view on egalitarianism? The mainstream view is, here we have utils or happiness units or something like that, and here we have money. And they say we have a diminishing marginal utility of money. Namely, the first dollar you make is very important, gives you a lot of benefit. The last dollar for Bill Gates is, should he light up his cigar with a $100 bill or a $50 bill? You get the idea? The more money you have, the happier you are. This is marginal utility, not total utility. The total utility curve would go up. Namely, the more money you have, the happier you are. This is marginal utility. It says for every extra dollar you get a positive amount of utility, but it's diminishing. So if here's a rich guy with $100,000 a year, and we take away $1,000 from him, and now he's only got $99,000, he loses that much utility. Yes? And now what we do is we give it to a poor guy who had 7,000, and he goes up to 8,000. So this is the same width. And we get an extra amount of utils, namely that amount. You get it? When we take $1,000 from a rich guy, he loses utility, but the poor guy gets more utility, so we should take money from rich people and give it to poor people. The problem with that is the pie gets smaller. We have more equal shares of a smaller pie, which is a problem. I mean, if you tell the guy who goes to medical school for 10 years or the person who spends a lot of time doing anything to make more money, and we say we're going to take away your money, and actually this is really a recipe for egalitarianism, because if there's any difference between a rich and a poor guy, you can always take some money away from the rich guy and give it to the poor guy and increase total utility. Well, that would be the mainstream economic view as to why we should have egalitarianism. There are problems with this. One problem with this is just assume that this is true. Why are they both on the same curve? Maybe the rich guy is on this curve, the rich curve, and the poor guy is on that curve. So when you take away money from the rich guy, you're losing all of that utility. And when you give it to the poor guy, you're only getting that much. So what you have is a loss of the difference here between them. I mean, anyone can draw any curve that they want. And I don't like the way they drew the curve, so I'll draw it differently. Who can say me nay? The more basic problem with that is, from an Austrian economic point of view, I'm an Austrian economist, this is nonsense. You can't measure utility. There's no such thing as a happiness unit. We're not against measurement. There's height, there's weight, there's speed, there's temperature. It's 70 degrees Fahrenheit out there. But there's no units of happiness. You can't say, well, I like this tie at 10 utils and I like this at 20 utils and therefore I like this twice as much. That's crazy. Okay, I agreed and I was told to speak for about 45 minutes. It's about 45 minutes. To just summarize what I said, I gave 6 or 8 cases why capitalism is great and the government is no good. And then I considered 3 or 4 objections to that, and I rejected the objections. So I conclude, hooray for capitalism.
Thanks, Walter. Let's open the floor to questions. Please raise your hand.
Not just questions, objections, comments, whatever.
All kinds of utterances, but short. And if it's comments, please keep it to the point. Remember, we're here to listen to Walter Block answering what you have to say, not to, the vice versa. You listening to you speak too much. Here you go.
So, in the very beginning, you said that the exception that coercion is bad is that it's okay to coerce a child. But I just want to get your comment on, in your view, when are you no longer a child?
There's no right answer to that. It's a continuum problem. Take the case of statutory rape. We know that if you go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, you're a statutory rapist, even if she agrees, because we don't think she's capable of agreeing to any such thing. You go to bed with a 25-year-old woman, and we think she's mature enough to agree, and if she agrees, you're not a statutory rapist. Well, where is the cutoff point? Is it 13, 15, 17? Nobody can say, well, it's 15 years and 7 months. Well, why not 15 years and 6 months or 17 years? There's no cutoff point. I think somewhere between 15 and 17, that would be my thought. Some societies have it a little lower, some a little higher. The ones that let girls marry at 9 years old, I think they're a little weird. But the continuum problem, look, right now I'm going to punch you. If you shoot me in self-defense, you're a murderer. Because this context is, first of all, I can't reach you. Second of all, we have an amiable relationship. So if you shoot me in self-defense, you're a murderer. On the other hand, if it's a dark alley and I have a wristwatch here and you think the glint is a knife, well, then you can shoot me in self-defense and I'm the bad guy. Well, you need a sort of a reasonable person to decide, but it's a continuum problem. There's no answer that emanates from libertarianism or from any other philosophy. Nobody can say, well, the statutory rape age is this. It's not a month younger or older, or you have to be 15 feet away or not 14 feet away. So it's a very good question, but there's no answer, I don't think, emanating from any legal philosophy.
Walter, I think many non-libertarians would argue that there's also a continuum problem concerning issues. Like with some issues, it is very clear that you cannot be a paternalistic towards adults. But on other issues, it gets harder. Like if you decide to commit suicide or take dangerous drugs or whatever. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. Milton Friedman rejected libertarianism on the following ground. I see one of you near a bridge and you're about to jump. And what I'm going to do, if I'm a nice guy, is I'm going to grab you. Because I don't want you to die. I'm going to, in effect, kidnap you. I'll try to reprogram you. And if you tell me the reason you're jumping is because you have an incurable cancer and the morphine no longer works, I'll drive you back to the bridge. On the other hand, if you said, well, your girlfriend left you or you got a bad mark, I'll say, well, there are other girls, there are other tests. and I'll keep you in prison for a day or two. Not forever. But, I mean, you're an adult, and if you want to commit suicide, you have that right. But I violated your rights. And if I'm such a good guy, I should be willing to take responsibility for kidnapping. Now, I hope that the judge would see my kidnapping in the way that I meant it, and let's assume God's eye view, so we don't have problems of, lack of information. I should get a little slap on the wrist because I invaded you paternalistically. Now, I did it for good motives. So I reject Milton Friedman's rejection of the non-aggression principle. One of the main elements of libertarianism is keep your mitts to yourself, don't grab other people or their property. And I grabbed you. But I think that we can put this under the libertarian umbrella and say that this is the way a libertarian would handle that problem. And it's not a refutation of libertarianism. We can encompass this and say that the guy who did it is guilty and he should get a slap on the wrist. And then you get other cases where you're a doctor and you see somebody choking and you put whatever in his throat to make him breathe easier, and then he sues you for invading him. And there are cases like that. And I think that the courts should properly throw out your claim, because he was trying to save your life, and he did save your life for all we know. So you get these anomalous cases where only a Milton Friedman, who is, the way I see libertarianism, there are 4 levels of libertarianism. One is libertarian anarchism, because the government is evil, per se. It compels you to pay taxes. The next one, and the person most associated with that would be Murray Rothbard, or Lysander Spooner, or the next one down would be minarchism, minimal government libertarianism, and the most famous people that supported that were Ayn Rand and Robert Nozick. And the third level, a little below that, is constitutionalism. Whatever the U.S., in the U.S. context, whatever the U.S. Constitution says is good. Interpreted what they meant, not the way the Supreme Court nowadays perverts the interpretation. And the most famous person there would be Ron Paul. And then, since I'm such a big tent kind of guy, I include classical liberals such as Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek, even though they sometimes give away the store. They have all sorts of compromises with our friends on the left. But they're sort of libertarian. I mean, they're very good on free trade and, government regulations and things like that. So I reject the Friedman-esque attempt to undermine libertarianism on the ground of suicide attempts.
Okay, thanks. A related issue. I think many people in this country would feel slightly uneasy about some of the stuff you said about the differences between men and women. We're out of a very, in terms of the sex, is very egalitarian. Also in other ways, a very egalitarian national culture. Now, let me challenge you a little bit on this. You can argue that there are many human traits that are very non-libertarian, that make perfect sense out of an evolutionary biology perspective. For instance, going to war. I mean, there are perfect natural reasons why men would have benefits out of going to war, raping all the women from the other tribe, etc., etc. That is not an argument for going to war. Certainly, you would agree as a libertarian that the non-aggression principle stands here, that going to war is wrong. I believe you are very much a pacifist in terms of what the U.S. Approach to international. Pacifist is not the right word. You think that it is wrong for the U.S. to engage in wars around the world, etc. So you could argue that on other issues as well, we should look at human nature in a critical way. And that might be the case for the question of the relationship between men and women as well. Wouldn't it be a libertarian project to try and make sure that women have the same opportunity in the labor market, in the market economy, to pursue career interests as men have? for instance?
Okay, I hear you, and that's a very good challenge also. First of all, libertarians are not necessarily pacifists. Some libertarians are. I'm not. My wife or kids are attacked, I'll use physical violence to repel the attacker. Some are pacifists. My view is sort of like Ron Paul's view of international relations. The U.S. should stay at home. The U.S. government, God bless it, has... 1,000 military bases in 130 countries, and there are only about 200 countries, so we Americans have soldiers all over the place. And we call it defense. Right now the NBA, the National Basketball Association, is having their finals, and everyone knows when the other team got the ball, you yell defense, defense. We can distinguish defense and offense. The U.S. somehow can't make that distinction. They think that when they have soldiers all over the place, that's defense. Suppose Brazil did that. Or, Burundi had soldiers in 150 countries, including the U.S. The U.S. wouldn't very much like that. So I'm not a pacifist, but I'm not a isolationist, because I believe in free trade with everyone. The ideal free trade is the Hong Kong free trade. They declare free trade with everyone, and if anyone puts up a tariff against Hong Kong, they just ignore it. Sort of like two people in a boat. One guy shoots a hole in the boat. Should the other guy shoot another hole in the boat? No. Just have free trade with everyone, and if other people don't want to... Look, suppose I wanted to trade with you with anything beginning with the first half of the alphabet, A through M. I'm willing to trade, but anything from N to Z, I won't trade with you. Should you say, well, therefore, I won't trade with you from A to M? No, you should say, I'm an idiot, and trade with me on the things I'm willing to trade with. Okay, so I'm not an isolationist, but I am a non-interventionist. Okay, now getting back to your point, I'm not justifying the fact that women, from their own volition, decide to specialize in childcare and housekeeping and stuff like that. That men aren't forcing them to do it, and the never married women make the same. There's no gap for the never married women, so it's not. I'm just explaining. I'm not justifying. I'm saying this is the facts, and the same with the glass ceiling. I'm not justifying this. I'm just explaining it. This is why women aren't winning the Nobel Prize or whatever. From a libertarian point of view, I'm indifferent. Because libertarianism is only a theory of the just use of violence. And all the libertarian can say is nobody should hit anyone. Nobody should rape or murder anyone else. From the human decency point of view, I suppose it'd be nicer if men and women were more equal, but it's sort of like, science fiction. The reality is that the standard deviation or the variance of women is very narrow, of men it's very wide. And I don't justify it, I'm just explaining why we have a glass ceiling. Because a lot of people say that the glass ceiling is part of capitalism and therefore capitalism is evil, and I want to defend capitalism. The same thing with the pay gap. I'm just explaining why women make less money than men. I'm not justifying it, although there is sort of a justification, namely, this emanates from the voluntary choices of men and women. And there were 2 or 3 people who said that the husband did more than the wife, and there were roughly 30% of the people that said it was about equal. Well, then there'd be no gap if that were really true.
We have a question here.
Hi, Walter. Thank you very much for the speech.
Thank you.
Very nice. About this gap and where you choose to work when you're a woman or when you're a man. I've been reading books from Warren Farrell. I don't know if you've heard about him, but he did a lot of studies in the US, and it appears that it depends very much on how you phrase the questions. There's a lot of methodology in this. So who does the most work in the house? That would, in most cases, be the woman. But who does the most work outside the house? Then there's a change in the equilibrium. and that part that means washing the car, mowing the lawn, driving the car when you're going out, and so forth. There's a lot of this, fixing the tiles, all this. There's a lot of that. So I don't think, to my knowledge at least, I don't think this is the biggest part of explaining the differences in the payment gaps. I think he argues that there are other factors, such as your willingness to take risk, which is way higher of men than of women, and the willingness to take opportunities, go traveling and living some other place. And well, it's more a comment than anything else, and I think it's very important to take into consideration. And then he makes the point, which is, I think, very beautiful, that there is this gap doesn't mean that there is some kind of glass ceiling or something for women. On the contrary, there are a lot of opportunities where you can get a high payment where there are not a lot of women working in reality, but there is a high payment for this, like a risk in mining, for instance. You can still be a woman, but in other types of jobs within the mining industry. So there are a lot of, or in war, where it's less risky, so to speak. But it's more a comment than anything else.
No, I thank you for the comment. I should have been more careful when I took the survey to include driving and home repairs. When the TV breaks, it's usually the husband that fixes it. He does the mowing of the lawn and fixing of the car if the tire breaks, and you don't call someone. The man fixes the tire.
It's that he does it, and that's a big problem in these surveys.
But I disagree with you, because according to the sociological surveys, they include all that stuff, and they still find that the woman does way more than the man. So
Okay. Well,
so we're just having a debate over the facts. And
check out Warren Farrell if you're interested.
I've read him. I'm familiar with him, and I think when you take everything into account, including the things that men do more than women, still women do way more than men. The reason I mention marriage is because marriage alone explains virtually all of the gap, but there are many other things. Like I gave you the case of the trailing spouse. Obviously, if they're going to move to London from Copenhagen for the woman's job and they're thinking of having children, that's a really stupid move. Another one is there was a survey of a company offered a promotion to being a foreman. And if you're a foreman, when the factory breaks down, you have to come in at 3 a.m. And all men applied. Virtually no women applied for that. And the only woman that would apply would be a never married woman. So there are many other factors. And then there's the thing about the obsolescence of human capital. If you think that you're going to be out of the labor market for 15 years or only partially, you're not going to enter a field which keeps changing, like, say, math or computers or physics. You're going to enter the pink-collar ghetto, so-called, namely, where teaching third-grade kids, or being a librarian or a secretary or something, where you don't have that obsolescence of human capital. So women go into different, they don't become engineers. My daughter-in-law is an engineer. Very, very few women are engineers. And engineers make good money. So that would be yet another reason. So there's a whole panoply of reasons explaining why the pay gap. Marriage is a very salient one, but you're quite right to say that there are others.
okay, there's another question here.
Thanks. You mentioned that if somebody attacked your wife and family, you would jump to their defense. Now, imagine if you're not the well-built, strong person that you are short and weak, you may decide to pay somebody to offer that defense in a voluntary transaction. But you may also decide to pay tax to have a policeman defend you. Could this line of thinking be developed into some kind of defense for state enterprise?
Well, nice try. But the point is that if you hire a private policeman or a private guard, or you go into a gated community, it's voluntary. Whereas taxes, everybody has to pay whether they like it or not. Take the pacifist. We mentioned a pacifist. The pacifist doesn't want to be protected, and he doesn't want any of his money to be used for a policeman to protect him if he's a serious pacifist, and yet he's compelled. Well, when you compel innocent people to do things that they don't want to do, and they're not 4 years old, you're acting immorally or unethically. Who gives anyone the right to go with a gun? Because if you don't pay your taxes, they're not going to come at you with a gun right off the bat. They're going to send you a nice letter. Hey, did you forget? We really need the taxes. Come on, pay. And then a month later, there'll be a little escalation. We really need the money, and if you don't pay, we're going to be mad at you. And then finally, there's a guy in a blue uniform with a badge and a gun. He's going to say, come with me. And if you don't come, he's going to shoot you. This is not ethical. So, I appreciate your point, but I just don't see how compelling innocent adults to do things for their own good, or maybe not for their own good, for any reason, you shouldn't do it. With the exception, as I mentioned, of Milton Friedman's, if you're at the bridge and you're going to jump, I'm going to grab you. But I'm going to be acting like a criminal. A quasi, not crazy criminal, quasi-criminal, sort of a criminal. But that would be an exception. Milton Friedman really had to dig deep to come up with this one, to undermine libertarianism. How many people jump off bridges and other people grab them? It's an interesting point, but it's hardly definitive. Compulsion is not a good thing. We shouldn't be compelling each other. The ideal civilized way of behaving is everyone acts with regard to the other in a civil way, namely not compelling. Not even the golden rule. The problem with the golden rule, act so as you would want to be treated the way you would want other people to treat you. The problem with that is the masochist. I want to be beaten, so now I can beat you? No. So I'm not a golden rule type. I'm a libertarian who says the non-aggression principle is the key element of legitimate law.
Regarding equality of pay, I think it was the comedian Bill Burr who said that, who justified the pay gap by saying if there's a break-in in the house, who goes downstairs, or if there's a house fire, women and children first. And if you have seen the ending to Titanic, who was drowning and who was floating away on a raft. But a different thing. The case where the woman bears the child and stays at home with it, I think for most people in this country, that would be the perfect argument for forced paternal leave. And it's a thing that are being discussed on a regular basis, that we should force fathers to take leave with the newborns. How would you answer them?
Well, I don't like that F word that you used. Force.
Yes.
Why should we force anyone? The only time force is justified is if somebody is physically attacking you. If you come at me with a knife, I am entitled to use force against you, but that's it. Not for any other good reason. There are many good reasons. I come at you with a gun, I say, give me your money, and you say, why? And I say, I'll use it for good purposes. I'll give women or men paternal leave or whatever it is. That's uncivilized. You're not supposed to force people unless in self-defense. Self-defense, fine. But otherwise, we rend, R-E-N-D, the fabric of civilization by using force, compulsion. A civilized way of dealing with each other is voluntary. Voluntary acts between consenting adults should be it. There are a lot of good things to be done. Look, I'm into chess, so I'm going to come at you and say, well, we need a subsidy for chess because we don't have enough chess players. Anyone can say anything. I've got a lot of things that I like and I want you to support and you don't want to. And if I'm going to be reasonable with regard to you, I'm going to say, hey, would you like to give money for chess or whatever it is that's my favorite thing? My favorite thing is Mozart and Bach. I love Mozart and Bach and Handel and Haydn and the boys. And we have rap music, which I don't think is music. It's horrible. So what we should do is tax rap music and subsidize Mozart and Bach. This man is agreeing with me. Well, yeah, that's what I would like, but do I have a right to compel you, people who don't share my views? Look, paternal leave for parents, mother, father, is a good thing, but there are so many good things out there. To use force to compel people to promote good things is uncivilized. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's bad. You shouldn't do that. Even though it's a good thing, and I agree with you, it's a good thing. Who could be against that?
Hello, Walter. Hi.
Hey.
I'm Ida.
Hi.
And I'm a woman. And I'd like to ask you for some advice. Obviously, the pay gap poses an issue for women because it means that for us to be financially independent from men makes it a little harder. And based on what you've said, the best advice I've gotten so far is stay away from men and don't have kids. And now you've just realigned that, forcing people to do something isn't a great idea either. And I also agree with that. But so what would your advice be, even if it's just in terms of encouraging people? What would you say to women and men? How do we solve this problem?
I would say if you want to be a good cellist, don't stay in the gym all the time and practice the 100 yards. And I would say if you want to be a good sprinter, don't play the cello. That would be my advice. And I would say if you want to have equal pay with men, don't have children. If you have children, it's the pay gap is way bigger than if you just get married and don't have children. I didn't go into that, but that's my advice. If you want to make an equal salary, study hard and don't have kids. Because if you have kids, and most women are really into. When my first kid was born, my wife wouldn't let me near him. I mean, she's afraid I was jab him with a safety pin or something. I mean, women are weird. I mean, they're really into kids in a way that men aren't. On average, there's some exceptions, but women are really into kids, which is biologically explainable. And if you do anything, you do it at the cost of not doing something else as well. You can't have it all, baby, the way the feminists say, because what they're doing is violating the opportunity cost or alternative cost doctrine, which is a key element of economics. Whenever you do anything, you do it at the cost of something else. Well, if you want to have 3 kids, and you have a twin sister who doesn't have 3 kids and she's otherwise equally able as you are, she's going to make more money than you. Tough. Am I being too cruel here?
You're right.
I mean, that's the facts. That's reality. I mean, it would be nice if we lived in fairyland or whatever. I shouldn't say that. That's probably anti-homosexual or something. I don't know. But science fiction land, if we live in science fiction land, then anything goes. But we live in reality, and in reality, we have opportunity costs.
How do you finance national defense, assuming that you want national defense?
Well, if we're minarchists or constitutionalists or classical liberals, we finance it through taxes. If we're libertarian anarchists, as I am, we support private defense agencies. And a private defense agency would protect you not only against your neighbor who looks pretty vicious, I'm just kidding, but against anyone else from another country or what have you. And there's a whole literature on libertarian anarchism. If any of you are interested in it, here is my email address, wblock@loyno.edu. If you're interested in anything that I've said that I don't have a chance to explain, email me, and I'll send you more literature than you want on this. And there will be opportunity costs. If you read it, you're not going to play tennis as well, or whatever else it is you're doing. But there's a whole literature on this, and we would have private defense agencies. Since you anarchy bait me, let me just spend a word or two on free market anarchism. The most compelling argument for anarchism or against government from this point of view is, see, the reason we justify the Danish government is you and I might get into a fight. And if you and I get into a fight, we need the government to make sure we behave. Do you know what the relationship of Canada and Denmark is right now? It's one of anarchy. There's no world government above them. So if Canada and Denmark get into a fight, we have anarchy. So if you don't like it, you favor world government. Most people don't favor world government. I'm Jewish. We're always running away from somebody. Thank God there are other countries to run to. If the bad guy became the dictator of the world, then there'd be no place to run. And if it was democratic, India and China between them would sort of run the world. We'd have a lot of reparations from Denmark to India and China. So if you really oppose anarchy, etymologically, A-N, the prefix A means against archy, and archy means unjustified rule. So if you really oppose, if you really favor government, you have to favor world government. It's sort of a logical step. And most people don't favor world government. So this is sort of an entering wedge for the libertarian anarchist to be against government. And look, government is not a good idea because they use compulsion against innocent people. And civilized people don't do that. They come up with another way to have defense or roads or the hospitals or healthcare or whatever. And it's usually a lot more efficient.
Also, the conservative challenge to that argument would be that there are certain entities where people have a common culture. That it doesn't follow from that idea that people with a common culture can get a functioning government, that you should favor a world government because the world doesn't have a common culture. What's your take on that?
Well, the Danes are more homogeneous than the whole world, obviously, even though there's not perfect homogeneity. But we all have some culture with everyone on the world because we're all human beings. We have more in common with human beings than with lizards or squirrels or something like that. So again, there's this continuum problem of, you have more in common with your cousin than with a fellow Dane, and you have more in common with a fellow Dane than you have with me, and you have more in common with me than with other people, say in India or China or something like that. So there's a sort of a gradation. But the point is that if people want to get together because they have a common culture, let them do it voluntarily. There was somebody, I gave a talk this morning, a very tall young man, blonde hair, said, suppose all the Danes get together and voluntarily set up a government. And I said, it wouldn't be a government if you voluntarily got together. It would just be a condominium association. Like a golf club or a tennis club. And it wouldn't be taxes, it would be dues. And that's fine if it's voluntary. But nobody signed anything. Nobody agreed to be part of this Denmark club. I didn't sign anything that made me a part of the United States club. The government is not a club. The government is compulsion.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. Can we take two and then we go back to you and you have a little bit of time to round off?
I'm at your disposal.
Okay, great.
Hey, Walter. Walter, one of your later and very interesting contribution is relating to abortion. And I would just like, because this is a foreign debate in Denmark, but I think you have a very interesting take on this. So can you spend a couple of minutes to explain what your solution to the pro-choice, pro-life debate that is ravaging your country is?
Sure.
And we'll take the last one and then then you have time to round up. Is that okay?
Sure,
Yeah?
sure. Whatever you want.
Hello. I'm having there is a Swedish scholar that has studied some development in the United States about the wage gap, and he's found that even from something like 20 years to 30-year-olds, that women are earning more than men due to various reasons. And he is criticizing Sweden because in Sweden women are gaining on men, so to speak, but they are not. They don't gain as much. Whereas in the United States, they are above before they are married, so until 30. And he suggests that because there are in Sweden, it's very difficult to get childs to what do you call it?
What do you call it in Swedish?
Dagis. Kindergarten. It's difficult to get your children to kindergarten late at night or in the weekends, and it's difficult, or it's very expensive to buy food in Sweden. And in the United States, it's much more. It's easier. And he compares all the countries in the in Euro, and he finds that I think Sweden and maybe Cyprus are the worst countries, as in how many of the CEOs are female. Cyprus and Sweden are the worst, and he believes that this is because of the welfare state. And he believes that so if we had more voluntary market-based solutions to just making your life easier, getting food. Starting a co-op with others and having help with taking care of your children and so on. So would it be easier in a voluntary society for female to become CEOs?
Okay, let me answer the last one first, and then I'll do the abortion one last. I was in competition with Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams to find the highest female to male income ratio. And we were doing stuff in Canada and the US based on how much education, based on what year. And I think I won. I got 109.8. Namely, for a certain cohort, women earn 9.8% more than men. It varies depending upon which country, what age.
This is just the last 10 years. So it has changed from 2000 to 2000.
No, my research was in the 90s and in the early part of the century, not in the last 10 years. I haven't looked at the statistics recently. But my understanding of the statistics is that age 16 to 24, most people are unmarried, and therefore the marriage hypothesis, the marriage asymmetry hypothesis wouldn't work. And there's no wage gap between men and women age 16 to 24. I think by age 30, more and more people get married or have kids. It doesn't matter whether they're married or not, they have kids. Then all of a sudden the asymmetry kicks in. With regard to the welfare state, how many were you here this morning? Just 2 or 3, so I'll repeat something I said this morning when we talked about immigration. Charles Murray is most famous for his book on the bell curve, but he also did a book called Losing Ground. And what I get from that book is that the welfare state ruined the family. And the family is the key element in terms of prosperity. Most juvenile delinquents and people in prison come from broken families. And what the welfare system did is it broke up the family. So you'd think that you're helping the poor by giving them money. And if you break up the family while you do it, you're really not helping them. So contrary to your book of improving the welfare system, I would say we should get rid of the welfare system because it breaks up especially the black family is more vulnerable to this because they're poor and a higher percentage of them are on welfare. But even in Sweden, where there are very few black people, there's a lack of family formation. There's not even divorce. It's a lack of family formation in the first place. During slavery, the black family was broken up in the United States. But after slavery, black people were putting ads in the newspaper, hey, this is Mary, where are you, Joe? And they would get together. My analysis of the 1900 and the 1910 and 1920 census was that the black and the white family were about as intact. The white family is 1% better. But after the welfare system got kicked in, I mean, there was always welfare, but in 1965 under LBJ Johnson, the welfare system became very generous, and then all of a sudden the black family broke up because the welfare system made a young girl who was pregnant a much better offer than the father of her child. And if the father of her child was in the house, she wouldn't get welfare. So she had children without the husband around, and it used to be a disgrace. If you were a girl and you had a child and no husband in the 50s and the 60s, you had to go live with Aunt Mary and come back later without the kid. Nowadays, they have special high school classes for pregnant girls. The whole antipathy to this is gone. And if you look at the statistics, you'll see that a family, intact family formation is almost a guarantee. There are the black poverty rate for intact families is in the single digits. The poverty rate for black people is virtually for non-intact families. So the key, if you want to have a public policy, is to keep the family together, and the way to keep the family together is to get rid of welfare. Let me talk about abortion for a minute or two.
Very quick, because we're a little bit, I know.
Abortion is...
beyond schedule.
Well, I'll give it the old college try. Abortion is one of the...
Let's not coerce people. Let's have a vote. Should we give Walter 5 more minutes to talk about abortion?
Okay.
The ayes have it.
Yes. Notice he doesn't ask the other way. Abortion is one of the most problematic disputes, not only in America in general, but among libertarians. What you have is Ron Paul, who is pro-life, and you have Murray Rothbard, who is pro-choice, and you can't get two more highly credentialed libertarians than those two. And I happily have the solution for this. Ha-ha. And it's called evictionism. See, the problem with abortion is that it's really two things. One, it's evicting or removing the fetus from the mother's womb, and two, killing it. Look, it's the same thing with unionism. The problem with labor unionism, it's really two things. If all they did was a mass quit, fine. If you can't quit, you're a slave. And if other people quit, you don't lose your right to quit. But then they do something else too. They have a picket line and they won't allow scabs to work. So it's a two-stage thing. Well, it's the same with abortion. And what the pro-life people say is you don't have a right to evict and you don't have a right to kill. What the pro-choice people say is you have a right to evict and to kill. What the correct libertarian view is called evictionism, is you have a right to evict but not to kill. Remember, there are two different things in abortion. And what I'm saying is one of them is legitimate and the other isn't. So, here I am, I'm a woman, I'm walking down the street, I get grabbed, I'm raped, and now I've got somebody growing in me. By the way, my view is, when does life start? With the fertilized egg? Because the sperm alone and the egg alone will not create a human being, but a fertilized egg will. In the Jewish tradition, you know when the fetus is viable? When it graduates medical school? So what I'm saying is, if we adopt evictionism, at one fell swoop, 1/3 of all babies will be saved. I mean, they have this horrible thing of partial birth abortion, where they go into the woman's body and they suck out the baby's brain and they pull it out dead. If that's not murder, I don't know what murder is. That's murder. And if we adopt evictionism, 1/3 of all babies are saved, and as medical technology improves, then babies in the 6th month and the 5th month will be saved, and eventually, medical technology is going to make babies safe. Surely in 100 or 200 years, all babies will be saved if we adopt evictionism. So my claim is we adopt evictionism, and be neither pro-life nor pro-choice.
Who's the parent of the baby?
Sorry?
Who's the parent of the baby?
Well, we know who the mother is. The baby is in her womb. I don't know who the father is. Ask her, I guess.
But she doesn't want the baby.
You see, the feminists say, I have a right not only to evict, but to kill, because I don't want that man's baby to see the light of day. Or say he raped her. Well, look, the baby is innocent of rape. It's just the father is a rapist. He's a bad guy. But the woman has no right to say, I don't want that baby to live. She only has the right to say, I don't want the baby to live here in my body. So she has the right to evict the baby, but not to kill it. So in my system, each side gets half a loaf. The pro-life people get half a loaf. You can't kill. And the pro-choice people get half a loaf. You can evict. But neither one gets a whole loaf. So what I'm saying is this is a principled compromise. An unprincipled compromise, I say 2 + 2 is 4, you say 2 + 2 is 6, and we compromise and we say 2 + 2 is 5. Well, it's a compromise, but it's not a principled one because, where did I get 2 + 2 is 5? But this is a principled compromise because it allows eviction but not killing.
But who takes care of the baby?
Well, whoever wants to, I guess.
Okay, so it's adoption.
Yeah, I mean,
so the mother has a right not to accept the baby.
The mother, in libertarianism, there are no positive obligations. You don't have to take care of anyone. And if the mother wants to evict an 8-month-old fetus and the fetus is viable, well, hopefully there would be markets in babies. Namely, people would buy and sell, not the baby, you can't own the baby, but buy and sell the right to be the parent. And there are lots of childless couples that want to adopt a baby, and presumably someone will adopt the baby if the mother doesn't want the baby.
Okay. Thanks, Walter. Well, I said this was going to be great, and I was right.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. That's it.